Welcome to another edition of Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show. I'm Anthony T. This is the 100th episode of the podcast. In this edition, I'm going to stay local for my 100th episode, as I'll bring on Director James Lamond and Patrick and Ashes from Throwdown Thursday to talk about It Came from the 508's latest project, Beneath the Red Umbrella, which is an audio serial podcast, which you can find on Spotify and iHeartRadio. That will be next segment. But first, I want to reflect on 100 episodes, as I never thought I would get to this milestone here on this podcast, seriously. Because personally, for me, I'm one of those people that just gives up at pretty much everything except this podcast. As I've been doing this podcast for almost 5 years now, and we finally got to 100 episodes. I know, it took a while, but we finally hit the 100th episode milestone here on the podcast. And it's been fun. I enjoy this. And I will be continuing to do more episodes of this solo podcast, as this is fun. As I started back in 2018 as Anthony T's Horror Show, over the years it's grown into adding wrestling to this podcast. I know we haven't gotten much wrestling lately, but I'm trying to change that for future episodes. Probably starting either next episode or most definitely the first episode in August, as I'll be reviewing WWE SummerSlam 2023. But I'm hopefully going to get more wrestling into this podcast, as I have been lacking on that lately. So that's one of my goals for the next 100 episodes, get more wrestling in this podcast and continue bringing entertainment like every 2-3 weeks, as I want to get to at least 200 episodes. Hopefully it doesn't take me nearly 5 years to get there, but I will try my best to get to 200 episodes. Now with that, I will be back with my guests, James Lamond, Patrick and Ashes from Throwdown Thursday, as we're going to talk about the serial horror podcast Beneath the Red Umbrella, which is definitely worth listening to if you have iHeartRadio or Spotify, as this is a very good podcast to check out. And we'll talk about that on the other side.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the films, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
Which is he's a robot, too.
Oh, I considered the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers are smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show. I'm here with Director James Lamond and Patrick and Ashes from Throwdown Thursday podcast, as they're all involved with a new project called Beneath the Red Umbrella, which is a audio podcast produced by It Came from the 508 Productions. How is everyone doing today?
Brad, how you doing?
Great.
James,
Yeah, having a great time.
James, I'm going to start with you since this is your project.
Okay.
How did Beneath the Red Umbrella come about?
Well, it was a product of a couple of bad things and a couple of good things. Bad things. Our feature film that we were crowdfunding had a bit of a financial deadlock, and while I was waiting for that to get sorted out with the IRS, kind of had nothing to do. So, and then a pandemic also. I don't know if you knew that. We had a pandemic, and during the pandemic, I had nothing to do. So what I did was I had all these stories sitting around that I wrote during the pandemic, and I was trying to think of a way to utilize them without having to really worry about going out and shooting, because I just wasn't sure when things were going to go down with the feature, when things were going to happen. So it was like, I can't shoot any of this right now. I don't have time, or potentially don't have time, to plan out a whole movie. But what can I do with them? And I started to think about all the horror podcasts, like the storytelling podcasts that I'd been listening to throughout the pandemic and so on and so forth. And I'm like, what if we did something like that? However, in true It Came from the 508 fashion, we couldn't just do something like that. We had to do something like that times 10 turned up to 11 with all these sound effects and all this wild stuff. And I pitched it to the core team, which includes my lovely co-guests tonight, Patrick and Ashes. And everybody was in love with the idea, and they said, let's do this. And so we did. And we didn't really know how it was going to turn out or what was going to come of it, but the response has been phenomenal. And if you're listening to this and you have been listening to Beneath the Red Umbrella, thank you so much for that.
For those who haven't been listening to this podcast, tell everyone about the podcast.
Well, it's an immersive horror audio experience. It's not necessarily just somebody telling you stories. It's someone drawing you into the story. You're being told the story as the story is unfolding. So there's actors, there's sound effects, there's a full score. I highly advise that people listen to it on either headphones or like in a quiet room with just like the speakers going, and just kind of let it soak in, because it's one of those things where there's so many nuances to it that you might miss something if you just like have it on as background noise or something like that, which is fine if that's what you're just going for. But this is something that's supposed to be, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but it's meant to be savored. It's a horror audio podcast unlike anything you've ever heard before. Period.
Now, this reminds me of all those old radio-style podcasts from the old days. Mm-hmm. Were you a fan of those?
Honestly, not really. Serial podcasts have never really been my thing. I only just got into storytelling, audio storytelling, in like the last couple of years. Listening to some of the newer stuff that's come out and being like, but mostly just in the sense of like, I'm listening to this and it's good, but like, there's something more that can be done here. Not that anybody's doing a specifically bad job, just that I'm saying like there's a way to take this to another level beyond what, people are usually doing. And that's why it's such a curated small season. That's why there's only 6 episodes, because I want it to be hyper focused and, curated to some degree.
Tell me about each episode in the series.
Okay. Well, we both know I can't go into spoiler town now, Anthony.
I know, but just tell, episodes
okay. Let me see.
in a brief description.
Let me see if I can do a spoiler-free version of this. Episode 1 is called The Confession, and it is about a man named Martin DuPont who wakes up in a police interrogation room covered in blood, and he doesn't know why. And the 2 detectives sitting across from him at the table are demanding he confess to a crime he doesn't remember committing. Episode 2, Dispatch, is about a police dispatcher who, in one of the most boring, run-of-the-mill small towns in the middle of, like, rural Connecticut you could think of. Nothing ever happens there until something comes out over her radio, and something does happen there. And it's very bad. Episode 3 is called The Grimm. And in The Grimm, a mafia enforcer has to come to terms with the fact that he has probably what is the worst curse of all time. He knows exactly when he is going to die. Episode 4, a personal favorite of this particular group that we have with us here for no reasons other than the fact that they acted in it. Love Agoraphobic is about a shut-in couple, married couple, that are more afraid of what's outside their door than what's in their own heads. That's the best way I think I could word that. Brackish Water, I can't do it, man. There's no way to explain Brackish Water. You just have to hear Brackish Water and experience Brackish Water. And let's just say worst fishing trip ever. Ever. Did You Ask Nicely is the 6th chapter in Beneath the Red Umbrella, and this is the one that I really, really, really can't spoil because it's the finale, but it is about a very cruel woman, a very, very unfortunate group of her servants, and a very weird storm. And that's about all I can say without spoiling any of the fun. That is the best way I could word it.
James, you play multiple roles in this series. Tell me about them.
Well, it was mostly about out of necessity more than anything. Because this was a new idea, and I got like our core group involved, but I kind of ran out of people, and I'm not afraid to say I was a little anxious to like approach people and ask them to be on it. It's just like, oh, this is this wild new thing, and I don't know what it's going to do or how good it's going to be, but we're going to try it. And it just seemed like really, like, I don't know. The idea of adding more people just made me more nervous. There was already 25 people in the episodes anyway, but so I kind of looked at this, like, group of small parts I had left and said, okay, well, I guess I could try. And I've never acted a day in my life that I've never, it was never something that ever struck me as a thing I wanted to do, but I figured I want to get this done, so I'm going to give it a shot. And then after I did Martin in the first episode, I listened back to it and I was like, wow, not to toot my own horn, but that was pretty damn good. Okay, maybe I can try it again. And if you listen over the series, like, all the parts, I feel like they get better and better, because I feel like I've gotten more and more confident as a voice actor along the way. But Martin's the one I'm definitely most proud of. I feel like that was the most emotional and difficult of the bunch to do. So, and it was the first one I did, so there you go.
Patrick and Ashes, how did you become involved with the project?
You want to take this one?
Sure. So, James asked nicely.
James asked nicely.
The best kind of friends to have are creative types who want to include you in their projects. And the fact that James, for some reason, sees something in myself and in Patrick and wants to include us in these projects that he's so passionate about. I mean, he could say jump, and I would say how high at this point, literally. I will do anything James asks of me within reason, but for the most part, anything he asks of me at this point, because I just admire his creativity so much. So he asked if we would lend our voices to these characters. He gave us scripts and allowed us to just kind of go with it.
Was this the first time that you and Patrick ever acted in a project?
Myself, no. I have a theater background, so I have been on stage pretty much since I could walk and talk. I haven't acted in a while, so this was kind of like dipping my toes back into the waters of the acting world, which, really just, I thought it was going to scratch an itch, and what it did was it just made it even worse. So now I'm really starting to put myself out there and looking for other projects and for other ventures to be a part of. But it was my first real foray into voice acting, so that was different.
That's not entirely true, because we worked together a couple of times as the voices of Wilmouse and Wilton the Darklings on the set of The Other Side of Midnight, which is still in development.
What was it like doing voice acting?
I think it's easier a bit than acting in front of a camera, simply because you're not worried about, any odd, tics that you might have, I'm using my hands too much and I'm obscuring my face, or I'm making a dumb face while I'm, reading this line, or I'm doing a weird behavior that wouldn't translate well to film. It really gives you the freedom to just kind of really be as wild and weird as you want when you're doing this particular thing. My character in The Grimm, for that, I was my posture while I was doing that was very stereotypical, and if I were to try to do that for a film, I don't think it would fly. It's you're just, I was basically being a caricature of a character, as far as how I was, behaving physically. So I think that's a little different for me. Ashes, what do you think?
So I found voice acting to be definitely more difficult than full body acting, because you don't have the ability to convey these emotions using your body language. It's just your voice. So when you have to, convey this whole, so I voice Eleanor in the 4th chapter called Love Agoraphobic, and she is just kind of going off the deep end. You kind of see her slowly delve into insanity even more so than she already is, while trying to maintain that she's fine. So, if I were to do that in front of an audience, I could, my hands could be shaking as my voice is completely fine, and you would say, oh, hey, clearly there's something wrong with this woman. Doing an audio drama like this, you don't have the ability to do that. So you kind of have to make your voice have this tremble to it while trying to, sound like you're okay. And it's just, it was really interesting and, not necessarily difficult, but to kind of bring myself to this place that I hadn't been before, and, I think it kind of made me stronger as an actor, and it gave me some tools that I will definitely take with me into other roles and other projects down the line.
James, besides Patrick and Ashes, what was the casting process like, as you have a lot of local filmmakers a part in this project?
Honestly, for the first time in my life, I can see that the casting for something was failing upwards. It just kind of fell into place. I wish I could say I had a method or a plan or something like that. But like, since this was so unproven, and like we've done films, so it's pretty easy for me to not to talk myself up or anything, but it's pretty easy for me as far as like in our local area to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, you want to be in my movie? And they're gonna go, yeah. But hey, you want to be in my immersive audio horror experience podcast? You're gonna get a couple more side eyes because you've never done that before. So really, it was just like I found the people that were closest to us, which is the entire cast of the feature film that we're working on right now, was involved immediately, and I love them for it. The entire cast of my other podcast, The Dead Kids of Derry, that was an easy layup too, because I was just like, hey, you guys want to come do this thing? And they're like, yeah. And then it was just a matter of really just putting the tumblers in the slots of the locks of where people were going to go. And that was harder. Don't get me wrong. That was more of okay, so who would make this work? Who wouldn't make this work? Who do I see as this? And that's where it became more of like film casting, because then it became, is this the voice I want to hear for that, rather than is this the face I want to see for that? You know what I mean? But it wasn't a horrible process. It was just more chaotic than I'm used to as far as the casting process goes.
What was it like working with other people, James? Because usually you work with the same people over and over again.
Ooh, how do I say this diplomatically? Refreshing. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. In addition to my mainstays like Bob and Erica and Dan and the Eli Roths to my Tarantinos, if you will. Being able to work with these two wonderful, talented people that are in this episode with us right now was a treat in itself. But everybody, I've said this on every interview, and I'm just gonna keep saying it. Filmmakers, playwrights, whoever's listening to this thing that's in the like indie horror scene in our area, go listen to Red Umbrella. Listen to these people destroy those parts, absolutely kill it in every way, shape, and form, and then hire them. They're the best you're going to get. They're the best you are going to get in this area. Hands down. Everybody. It's nothing but the truth, Patrick. Nothing but the truth. You guys, the Mendells, Dan, Erica, Sherry Lee, Chandra, Ashley, God, I wish I could just remember. It's really hard to remember everybody's name on the spot. But everybody in those credits just killed it. They killed it. They came in, they understood the assignment, and they killed it. Now, is that a credit to my casting, or is it a credit to their talent? I think it's a little bit of column A, column B, but it doesn't matter, because they're just that good. And everybody should look at them seriously for whatever parts they have up their sleeves, because they're incredible. They're all incredible. This Beneath the Red Umbrella would not be what it is if they weren't that good. Period.
This is for all three of you. What was the recording process like?
Who wants to take that one first?
I'll go with that one. It was interesting. It was definitely much different than I expected. What's wild is you can't tell from, especially in episode 4, Love Agoraphobic, that Ashes and I were in. Some of the conversation that takes place, you would think that we were all in the same room together, but we are not. Like, we did, Ashes did her lines, I did my lines, and everybody else did their own lines separately, and then it was edited together by James. So it was, despite how it sounds, like none of us were ever in the same room together. I mean, Ashes and I were, because we live in the same place, so to not be in the same place would have been more of a challenge. But having like listening back to it, it sounds like we're all in the same room, which I think is a testament not only to the way James directed everyone to do their lines, but how they did their lines, and then the way James edited it all together. Like, I think that's the biggest thing.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Ashes, you want to go? Because I have a very different answer than you guys are going to.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, the recording process was a lot easier than what I had envisioned it being. And that's partially due to the fact that James has a trust the process approach to certain things, and he just let us go. Gave me, I asked for a minute just to kind of get into character and let him know when I was ready, and then we just went with it. And it was maybe 2 takes, I believe, just because, you want 2 takes just to be on the safe side. And then that was it. It was a lot quicker and smoother than I had anticipated. And again, it's partially because I think, James will allow people to interpret things, and, he trusts the people who he gives these characters to interpret, his words in their own way. And then, whatever they give him, like, it's a whole trust the process thing that he does. And I appreciate him for that.
You gotta, to truly get a good performance out of an actor, you've got to let them find it. I firmly believe this. I know a lot of directors that rule with an iron fist and say, it's my way or the highway. But I feel like you're never going to get the best performance that an actor could give you if you don't let them find it on their own and then guide it after the fact to be what you need it to be. It's much easier to take what they've created out of your character and then bring it back into that space and go, okay, well, here's where we need to steer it. You know what I mean? Rather than fighting them on the character that they've created and saying, no, I want it this way. Let's see what we can come up together. It's a very collaborative process. And that's always how I work. That's how I work with the films. That's how I work with Red Umbrella. It's the way I do this. And I feel like it gets you, in the end, it gets you a better performance. It does. It might not be for everybody, but it works for us. And that's what matters. And the results speak for themselves. As far as the recording process for me goes, on my end, it was chaos. It was absolute insanity. Luckily, PJ and Ashes live together, and they have the same Zoom that we could all record over to do it. But there were some cases, man, where people were recording episodes and they in the same Zoom call, and they weren't even in the same episode together. Like, people are recording for one episode, and then somebody else is doing lines from another episode, and they're like, wait, that wasn't in there. I'm like, this is a different episode. Shut up. It was pandemonium. It was nuts. But the hardest part, and Ashes touched on it a little bit, was keeping all of that conversation that PJ's talking about, how everything syncs up so well. I had to keep that all straight somehow. Nobody saw it, but I had a notebook about that fat sitting on the side of me every time we recorded with little notes. They were like, okay, they said it this way, they said it like this, okay, we need them to react this way, all right, great, awesome, because I had to. I had no way in hell of ever being able to keep it all straight unless I wrote it all down after we recorded. It was, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying it's chaos, like it's a bad thing. No, I think the chaos made it even better. At least on my end. This is when I thrive. When I have to do like 7 things at the same time, like that's where I'm in my element. It's fun.
James, Patrick, what was it like having to change the way you approached your characters for each episode in terms of vocals, as you play different characters in more than one episode.
Yeah, me and PJ are both kind of chameleons in these episodes, aren't we? You want to go first, PJ, or?
Yeah, I'll. What's funny is, I've noticed that a lot of times when I'm doing different voices, especially if I'm just screwing around on the podcast, like most of my voices devolve into John Travolta. No matter what I'm trying to.
Yeah, they do.
No matter what I'm trying to do, it always devolves into John Travolta. The thing was like in the Grimm, when I play the mafia guy, like it took a few tries. So I was like, let me try this. And I was like, I didn't even wait for James to tell me that it was terrible. I was like, no, that's no good. And he was like, yeah, it was bad. Because it was just too stereotypical. But again, we just were hanging out with Steve Van Samson recently, and he told me, he's like, yeah, listening to these episodes, I could tell in the Grimm and in the main voice that I did in Love Agoraphobic. He's like, yeah, I can tell that was you. But he said he had no idea that I played Rory the neighbor, and I was like,
you killed
that. What? Awesome. Like I was basically just doing my impression of the old SNL skit of Bill Swirsky superfans.
Yeah, that was
great. That's all I was doing.
It was so good.
He said he didn't have any idea that was me, and like that's kind of what I was going for. Like that's I've watched a lot of different voice actors and like how they get into their performances, and after a while, like you're listening to someone, you're like, okay, that's Dan Castellaneta. Like even when he's not Homer Simpson or Grandpa or Krusty, it's like, okay, that's Dan Castellaneta. That's Hank Azaria. That's, Billy West. Like you can tell who certain people are because they have like certain like nuances that they always bring. The one guy that I always thought was the most incredible was Mel Blanc, and I just shared a video the other day of him on Johnny Carson doing his different voices. He has over 400 different distinct voices that he would do. Like he's basically every Looney Tunes character there is, which to me is insane because they're all vastly different, but still at that deep like core level. Like if you're listening to it, like, okay, Sylvester does have a little bit of Yosemite Sam in it. Tweety has a little bit of Bugs Bunny in it. Okay, like you can tell it's the same guy, but after a while, that's just how it is. Like you can only change your voice so much. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was just, how can I disguise myself, but also be true to the character? Like that to me was my biggest goal.
That's the trickiest part of it all. Like I said, like most of the acting I did for the series was out of necessity more so than me just wanting to be in every episode. I already narrate the damn thing. That wasn't exactly what I was thinking of when I started doing it. I was just shit. I need somebody to do this. And yeah, but no, I just to kind of piggyback off what Patrick just said. I don't think it's like the easiest thing to make all of the voices, but it had to happen that way because that was where I was coming from. Again, was a place of necessity. It was like, if I just do my voice in every episode, it's gonna sound like, oh, there's James again. It's gonna break the immersion. It would have spoiled the whole shebang. So I had to come up with some voices for stuff. And really, my motivation was far less original with where my voices came from. Like in episode 2, it was like, I guess I'm gonna make this cop a hillbilly. So it was basically just me trying to impersonate Cletus from The Simpsons. And then in episode 3, The Waiter, it was just me trying to be what the hell is it? It was an old cartoon. The character named Chet Wilson. Yeah, I was trying to be that guy. And then in episode 4 with the Doctor, I tried and failed miserably to impersonate Louis Skolnick from Revenge of the Nerds. But what ended up at the other end was something completely different from that, so it worked. But yeah, no, I far less creative than Patrick. I was just like, I'm just gonna fake to be other people until, they don't think it's me.
Moving on to a couple episodes in the series. First off, one of the best episodes I think this series has was Chapter 2 Dispatch. James, how did you come up with the story?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, there's not much of a surprise to this one. I just didn't think zombies were scary anymore. I feel like we've gotten to a place where zombies... When I hear somebody saying, oh, there's a new zombie thing, I'm immediately I tune out. I don't care. I feel like zombies were played out. But that was kind of like a dare to me that I made to myself. And I pulled out this 2-page treatment from my pile of pandemic stories called Dispatch. And it was about a police dispatcher, and it was about something horrible happening and her being trapped at the station and the radio being the only thing between her and finding out what's going on. Then I thought about it a little bit more, and I said, what if this was zombies? You know what? I bet we can make this scary. And the end result was pretty damn scary, so I think we did okay.
Yeah, it was, because when I think of Dispatch, I would think it'd be dealing with a serial killer or something like that.
Originally it was. It was somebody killing cops and calling into the station on the dispatch radio from the radios. It was calling the dispatcher, and the terror of it was he was getting closer to her. Every person was a little bit closer to her, and but she had no way out of the station because it was like the middle of a snowstorm and like things. It was a cool idea, but I thought that when I put the zombies into the same context, that they were ever closer, all hell breaks loose. And I just thought that was a really cool way to rethink zombie horror and make it in a scary way. And really, like, the dispatch radio thing, like, that wouldn't work as a movie. I don't think that would work as a book. That was something that immediately, when I first started to curate the episodes, it was one of the first ones I picked out because I was like, that will play out awesome as an audio play because it's all over a radio.
What was like trying to get the radio effects and the creepy sound effects for that episode?
My background initially, when I first started making art and all that stuff, was sound engineering. I was a musician. So that stuff actually, I have this bevy of knowledge chilling in the back of my head that I haven't used in years because of this stuff. And I'm just applying it in a different way. So really, a lot of that stuff was pretty easy. It wasn't that hard. But I did find a really great effect bank called Production Crate that was licensed sound effects that I didn't have to go out and make on my own, or like, it just saved me a lot of time. And I licensed a bunch of stuff from them, and a lot of the radio effects are me manipulating their original effects to fit my purposes.
How did you find the lead actress for that story? As she did a great job with the way she performed her character, as it was very key in making the story work as an audio story.
Alyssa, I mean, she's one of our lead makeups on the feature. She's a great friend. She helps us out with con booths. I mean, it came from the 508 through and through. She's been more behind the scenes than the other guys like Erica and Dan and stuff, but she's just as much in the mix. So she's always been here, and it was another one of those. It was like, Ash's and Patrick's situation where it's like, well, we've never done this before, but let's give it a go. Let's give it a shot. And I had a feeling that Alyssa would be able to bring what it was. But I would like to also give a shout out to Ryan Corrigan, who played the sheriff, who played the captain. I don't think it would have worked as well if they did not play off each other so well in the episode. You know what I mean? Like, they both did such a good job, but instead of like canceling each other out, like if you get too hammy of a performance, can cancel each other out a bit. These just elevated each other. It just made it that much more great. But no, I completely agree. Alyssa was amazing in the episode. She did such a fantastic job.
Yeah, no,
I want to kind of piggyback onto that because Alyssa is the one of two characters that I have in my upcoming film. So, just want to throw that out there.
Very exciting. Very exciting stuff. So excited to see this happen, Patrick. You have no idea.
Yeah, as I thought the performances in that one was very good.
Yeah. Definitely, well, you'll be seeing more of them real soon. Ominous.
Moving on to another story. Chapter 4, Love Agoraphobia. James, how do you come up with this story, as this has eerie ties to the COVID-19 pandemic, as the main character is afraid of getting sick all the time?
Well, okay, gonna get a little personal here. I've never said this to anybody, but about halfway through the pandemic, I had kind of a physical and mental breakdown of some sort. And I was kind of Eleanor for a little while. That was me. I was afraid to leave the house. I went a little batty. Mental health problems, they happen. Especially during those times because everything was so weird and scary and things. So it was pretty easy for me to associate that, but no, that was my way out. That's generally when I write, it's either because I had a really, really, really great idea or I have some shit to work out. And Love Agoraphobic was definitely the latter. I did not do well in isolation, and I still don't do well in isolation. But that was my path out. That was Love Agoraphobic was the story I wrote to remind myself that the world isn't all that scary, and being stuck inside is far scarier.
Was the filming of the recording in this episode different, considering he had both Ashes and Patrick as their couple?
It was a little bit different because we were all on the same Zoom call, but we still handled it the exact same way. They still took turns recording. They didn't record on top of each other or any of that stuff. So it was different, but it was also not different. If that makes sense.
Ashes, tell everyone about your character, Eleanor.
So, Eleanor is this very delightful woman who has really allowed herself to be completely overcome by her biggest fears and finds herself really living inside of her head and believing that the voices are real and really distancing herself from everybody except her spouse.
What was it like playing a character like that?
So, I have a lot of untherapized trauma kind of tucked away in this Rolodex that I keep, in the back of my mind, that I can pull out from time to time. But, Similar to James, a lot of people don't know this, but I deal with anxiety on a daily basis. I am a very anxious person. I am also unmedicated. I choose to deal with it in a more holistic, kind of way. So I just kind of allowed myself to, after reading the story, reading the script, and kind of processing, okay, how do I want to play this character? What do I want to, what do I personally want to bring to the table to bring this character to life? And I really allowed myself to just kind of tap into this unprocessed trauma that I have. Not necessarily what Eleanor is going through, but, parallel to it. And during the pandemic, I did at one point find myself not only, I'll say afraid, for lack of a better word, afraid for myself, afraid for some other people around me, being part of the minority who was at risk. If I'm asthmatic, so, there's this whole, especially towards the beginning, where nobody really knew what it was or what exactly the symptoms were or what those symptoms could cause to those who had, predispositions to other things. So there was a point where I was terrified, because terrified of the unknown. So I allowed myself to kind of bring myself back to that place. And, I think then that's kind of where Eleanor comes from.
Was it tough playing the character, considering that you had to carry the entire episode?
No, because I love being the center of attention.
I was gonna say it, but I was gonna say don't threaten her with a good time.
No, I honestly, I felt honored with the fact that James trusted me to, bring this character to life and, be the main focal point of this entire episode. So if anything, I wanted to do the best job that I possibly could because he trusted me with this character. No, I honestly, I loved the opportunity. The stuff that I do, I'm a very campy, funny person. I like to keep it light. So the fact that I had the opportunity to really kind of go deep into this headspace and bring this character who is just, she is really going through it, and she is a piece of work. Let's put it that way. To have the opportunity to bring her to life in that way, it was awesome, kind of being able to bring myself to that place.
Patrick, how difficult was it trying to play two roles in the same chapter, as you had to come up with different voices for each character?
Well, it wasn't super difficult. As Ashes can attest, I tend to have random conversations with myself, so it's almost like having two different voices. But when it came to this, knowing that there were going to be two different people, the main challenge for me was to make them sound as different as possible, because they're representing two completely different aspects of human nature. So I really wanted to make Rory the neighbor just sound ridiculous, and I was like, what would a guy named Rory sound like, aside from Rory Culkin? What would a guy like that sound like? What would he be like? And I just wanted, based on what James had written, I just wanted to come up with something that sounded plausible for a concerned neighbor, but also, being a writer myself and, knowing kind of what James was going for, trying to kind of offset the other stuff that was going on by kind of injecting some absurdity into the character. Like, he's a very stereotypical Chicagoan. He's like, hey, I'm just here to make sure everything's going all right and you're doing okay, you know? Like that voice is so weird and ridiculous because it's a parody of, you know, the Chicago accent. It kind of heightens everything else and sort of puts the terror at a different angle, because you're almost like you know that this is supposed to be like a scary thing, but you're listening to this like, it's like, why is this, he's so out of place. Why does he sound like that? I mean, because her sister, Eleanor's sister, who was, Jessie played her, she was, you know, she sounded like a normal sister, you know, like regular old concerned for your safety type, of person. But Rory was very different. I also imagined Rory as having kind of like an unrequited like crush on Eleanor.
I think that came through. I do. I think that came through in the performance. I do. I'm not kidding. Like, it reminded me of the nerdy kid in high school that got to hang out with a really, really hot chick, and she's obviously clueless, but he is, like, in love with her, and that's the there's a feel of that. Like, that, I feel like that really did come through in the part. I do.
Okay.
If only we had chemistry.
I know, right?
Well, if only. I don't know. You know, you guys might even be married. Fuck me crazy.
James, tell me about the haunting score for Beneath the Red Umbrella.
Well, that's a mixture of several elements. It's not just one thing or the other. First of all, that lead title theme is, of course, written, performed by the brilliant Jeremy Arruda, director of Strawberry Lane and composer extraordinaire. And thankfully, he's like my pocket John Williams, and when I have a crazy idea, he's usually down to say yes. So that's where that came from, and that's all of his brilliance in a nutshell. I had nothing to do with that. However, the score that actually happens over the episode itself, a lot of that was me. A lot of that was production crate elements that I brought in and put together and edited a certain way to sound different than they originally were. The soundscapes, I thought, when we first started working on the project, I had like 3 very like key pillars that had to hit. The narration had to work, the acting had to work, and the soundscape had to work. The sound effects and stuff, that was a layup. That's easy. That's easy work. That's okay. Somebody's getting hit with something here, you put that noise there. Somebody's stepping on a glass bottle, you put a breaking bottle noise. That's easy stuff. The soundscape is not easy. There's a mood you're trying to capture. There might even be just a mood for a millisecond, a moment, where a big event happens, or a character's performance changes, or the twist comes. Something. You need to shape those soundscapes and those scores to move that in, and you use it to either trick the audience or set the audience up or tell them something's coming. It's so important. It's so vital to the formula of Beneath the Red Umbrella that stuff got right. And that was probably what took the most time in the editing room, was making sure that all worked. And it was a challenge, but between my work, Jeremy's work, and stuff like that, I think we did a pretty good damn job. I think it came out really good, as far as that goes. And yeah, it was difficult, but very rewarding. I think it came out very good.
James, have you ever considered acting in any of your own films?
Oh, hell no. Absolutely not. No way. I'm not a camera guy. I'm not an in front of the camera guy. We tried that once. I had to play that hillbilly in One Last Kill because the dude that was supposed to come and film the part blew it off or whatever. I mean, I don't blame him. We're just some idiots in the woods trying to make a horror movie. Nobody even knew who the hell we were at that point. But yeah, no, after that was my one and done. I don't have any interest in being on camera whatsoever.
Will they be season 2 of Beneath the Red Umbrella?
I don't think we have a choice. I really don't. I don't think we have a choice. The people have spoken. If this had come out and like 5 people listened to it and then, you know, nothing happened, then probably not. I probably wouldn't have done it again. But it is, I can confidently announce and say this had just this morning crossed 7,000 total streams for the entire series. It is sitting at a 5-star rating on Spotify and iHeartRadio, and it's an ace on the consumer side. It's the second most successful thing we've ever done. We don't have a choice. Season 2 is inevitable. I can't even deny that. It would be pretentious and just really douchey of me to say, well, I don't know, because that's stupid. I mean, we'd be absolutely stupid not to do this again, because it's run away beyond our control at this point.
How can they find information on Beneath the Red Umbrella?
It came from the 508.com. Best place to find it, hands down.
On social media?
Social media, we got the Beneath the Red Umbrella group on Facebook. You can check us out. It came from the 508 anywhere, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I think that's it. I don't know. I'm pretty sure. And yeah, you can just find, and there's links to the stuff everywhere on all of those social media platforms. But the best one is the Beneath the Red Umbrella group, because they get to listen to everything first. So that's a thing that we do when people join the group. It's free it's not any exclusive special club. You just request it and you get added to the Facebook group, and you will get the episode a day early when we have season 2. When's that going to be? That part I can't answer. I don't know. But yeah.
James, Pat, and Ashes, any upcoming projects on the horizon?
Oh man, where do we? Oh, you know what? You guys do your part. I'll make my announcements after that.
All right. Well, as I alluded to, I will be directing my first ever short in the very near future, the next couple of weeks. I can't say the title of it because it kind of is a spoiler, but we'll just use the working title Girl Power for the moment. It will be featuring Alyssa, as we mentioned, and a very new actor, our good friend Old Man Wade, is going to be playing the killer, mainly because I think he was perfect for the part, and also there are so few black horror icons. I think, not that I think that, this is going to blow up and turn into be like, oh man, like this is the next Candyman, but, I wanted to give people a chance to do something that they'd never gotten an opportunity to do, because I have been given several opportunities over the last couple of years to do things that I never thought I'd be able to do. So this whole project is basically me trying to show what I can do as a filmmaker, with my own work, as opposed to just working on other people's stuff, which I love doing. But, I feel like I'd like to show folks what I can do. And I've gotten some pretty positive feedback about the fact that I'm going to be doing this. Ashes is going to be my first AD. And I told her, a lot of people were very surprised that I didn't have her in the lead role. And I was like, well, that's how she knows I love her. I'm not going to have her running back and forth in the hot July sun. Like, she can just kind of hang out in the back and, help me help me direct, and like she's been very very good about kind of reining me in already, because it's like, oh, I want to try this and I want to do that. And she's like, you don't have to do everything that you want to do ever on this first project. Like, you can take your time, like, because I think you're trying to do too much, you know, because I want to do like a 30-second trailer, and this is only going to be like a 5 to 6 minute video. So she's like, you don't need to cram all of this stuff into it. Like, you can spread it out and do different things. Save this idea for the next project, or, you know, the next project. You know, I'm lucky enough to have people who want to work with me and want to help me out, because if I were to try to rent all this equipment and, you know, do this myself, I don't have the expertise behind the camera to know how to run a camera. I don't know how to, you know, do lighting and everything. Like, I have vague ideas, but I'm not an expert by any means. So I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. I'm also working on a sequel to How Much Do You Tip an Exorcist? You might have seen one of my short stories recently in the Monster Mag put out by Monster Expo. That's what I've got. Ashes, how about you?
We've recently announced the launch of our new project, Magenta Manor Productions. So our first project will be filming and producing Patrick's directorial debut. And while we are doing that, I am in the process of writing my first script. So we'll get his stuff worked away. We'll edit. We'll do the promotions. We'll do all that stuff. That's going to be the first release from Magenta Manor, and then the second release will be my project. So, and my directorial debut. So I'm really excited about that, working a lot behind the scenes on some stuff. Obviously, we have great things happening at Throwdown Thursday, our podcast, and a couple of other things in the works too, including a potential cooking show coming end of this year, next year. So stay tuned.
A cooking show?
Yes. Well, I mean, seeing as we're spilling the tea on some stuff here, yes, it is called Nightmare Kitchen and Cocktails. Nightmare being me, Ashes Von Nightmare. Yeah, so I'll be sharing some of my recipes, some of my cocktail recipes and stuff, and it'll be a lot of fun. So in the process of kind of getting that together as we speak. So a lot of things cooking here, so to speak.
I got some stuff. I think. I don't know. Do I have some stuff? I think I have some stuff. Okay, so Abigail. Just talk about the big, scary vampire in the room. Abigail is no longer called Abigail. Abigail will now be called. The new title of Abigail is Stakes: A New England Vampire Story. That is the name of the feature. It is being produced. Is this okay if I announce this with you guys?
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Please do.
It is being produced by It Came From the 508 Productions with my subsidiary 508 Red, Guerrilla Girls Productions, and Magenta Manor Productions.
Woohoo!
We're all going all in on the feature film that I wrote. It's very flattering. I'm very happy about it. We are in the process of putting together our proof of concept, and if all goes well, fingers crossed, we will begin filming September 1st. So there's that.
I love it.
Oh yeah. We ain't stopping now, baby. The Red Umbrella was just the revving the engine. Now we're gonna go. Not done. We have two new movies from Jeremy Arruda coming out on It Came From the 508 Direct 2 weeks from now. That's a first. Nobody's ever heard that before. Let's see. We have two new Blu-rays coming out for the Halloween season. We have two. One is going to be called Painting the Void. It is going to be a collection of all of Jeremy's film work on one disc. It's going to be wild. Now, the second one I'm a little more excited about, but that's just because I got a bias because I made all of it. We are reissuing a remastered versions of One Last Kill, The Box, and Bro on a single disc as a triple feature. They will be all new, supporting HDR 5.1 surround sound with all new commentary and other little featurettes that I'm working on right now for the disc. It is going to be called The Ties That Bind, the definitive editions. And that should be available right around Monster Expo 3D, I'm hoping, for both of those. So that's where I'm hoping to do the big premiere of a lot of this stuff, which I can't announce everything just yet. But I think that's it. Yeah, that's all I can talk about right now.
Well, James, Patrick, and Ashes, thank you for coming on to my podcast again.
Absolutely, sir.
Of course.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anthony T.
And I'm Director Andrew Duran, and we are the
Two from Hell.
And we're putting Rated R back into podcasting.
Every month we will be dropping an episode on the Dark Discussions Network.
We'll be chatting about some of our favorite films, news, reviews, and maybe interviews.
You can find Two from Hell on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast providers. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram at Two from Hell Podcast.
Trust me, you're seriously not going to want to miss the show.
For all your social media needs on Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling Show, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, and /rap at Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling. On Twitter at Film Arcade Media. You can listen and subscribe to Auntie T's Horror and Wrestling Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other major podcast providers. You can also listen to the show on YouTube at youtube.com/@FilmArcadeMedia and darkdiscussions.com. What's Anthony T watching this episode? Well, Anthony T is watching the remake of Children of the Corn. That's right. They've done another remake of Children of the Corn. And yes, we did not need another remake of Children of the Corn to begin with. But I was willing to be fair and give this film a shot, since I like horror films and everything. And I have to tell you, this was a horrible film. Why did they have to remake this film? We did not need a Texas Chainsaw remake last year. This year we get a Children of the Corn remake that's been sitting on a shelf for 3 years. It's not good. Seriously, I don't want to see remakes of films that aren't going to be that good, quite frankly. It's like there's no effort into these remakes. Seriously. I don't get why we're seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Children of the Corn remakes. Those are not usually good. Seriously. But we're getting them. And this was just a horrible film from start to finish, literally. I really was kind of pissed off with this film, quite frankly. And it's like a few times I ever get pissed off at a horror film. I want to give every horror film a chance. But when you start your film in a disgusting manner, it pissed me off. I'll go into details in the opening scene of this film. It's about where a kid comes out of the cornfield and starts killing people. He pretty much kills an adult, then he gasses children off screen, which is disgusting and deplorable. This is not needed in horror films, people. Scenes like this. I don't want to see scenes like this. This isn't trauma. I don't get it. We're in 2023. Be a little sensitive towards children, please. That was such a disgusting opening. And quite frankly, I thought about shutting off this film. But still, I decided to soldier on with this film. And it just got worse from there. Literally. One of the main reasons why this film really sucks, quite frankly, is there is no build to the scenes. At any point in this film, they don't do any building. Sure, they may do a little building towards the end of the film, but everything else feels tacked on, rushed. I don't like that in my films. I like to get to know the characters. I like them to be likable. There were not any likable characters here. Writer-director Kurt Weimer's direction here was flat out horrible. Every scene in this film felt bleeping lifeless. I don't know why Weimer decided to write a film where he just wanted to just let the scenery take in. That's what it felt like, because I was bored the entire time. It also helped that his screenplay was flat out bad as well. Seriously. There's no likable characters in this film. I could not get into any of the characters in this film. It's like every character had one note to them, and that's it. One-dimensional characters usually make for a very bad film. And this film really has it. As it just was pathetically written badly. In that opening scene too, which I'll go back to, it's disgusting. I don't know why any producer or anybody would greenlit a scene like that given today's climate. I don't want to see that type of brutality, because seeing a bunch of little kids get killed off screen makes me bleeping embarrassed to be a horror fan, because this should not be in the horror genre at all. That level of brutality, I don't care if you do it on screen or off screen, that has no place in the genre. Quite frankly, why did this film get remade? Seriously, why hasn't Stephen King spoke up about this film? Because literally, this is disgusting. That opening scene is disgusting. And it got worse, throwing in politics into the film as well, with the whole corn farmers struggling backdrop. I support corn farmers. I support hardworking people, but I don't need politics in my horror film. Seriously. I see why this film really sat on a shelf for a bit, quite frankly, because this film was just flat out awful. And the ending of this film is atrocious. It felt like it was tacked on. No suspense, no build to the ending. It's like it had two endings. It felt like a David Lynch film, but David Lynch can get away with having two endings. But this film did not need two endings. I don't get this film. Seriously, Kurt Weimer. It just is horrible. Quite frankly, horrible. It's literally the worst film I've seen all year. And I just saw M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. That was horrible. Which I watched on Peacock. I just saw Consecration. That was horrible. What is this, Shudder? Seriously. Out of the bottom 4 films of the year, 3 of the films were on Shudder. What is going on with that network this year? Seriously. Last year, they only had 1 film in my bottom top 10. So far, after 51 films I've seen, they have 4 films in the bottom 10. Sure, they have 3 films in my top 10 so far, but 4 films in my bottom 10 is not good. Especially 3 in the bottom 4. What is going on with Shudder this year? Seriously. They're putting out crap from RLJ Entertainment. What is going on with that company? Seriously. Because them and Shudder never put this amount of crap out. And we're only in July, people. We're in July. Screenbox seems like they're the best network right now. Literally. Sure, Shudder has some great films mixed in with the horrible films, but Screenbox only has like 1 film I've seen that are in the bottom 10. And Shudder almost has half of the bottom 10 films. With 4. Come on, Shudder. This is supposed to be the best horror network. Not a place where you dump crap like Consecration, Spoonful of Sugar, Nocebo, and the Children of the Corn remake. Because literally, I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth this year, Shudder. Seriously. Guys gotta step it up with some really good films. Come on. I'm really hoping that VHS film that comes out this year is very good. Literally. But back to Children of the Corn. Don't waste your time with this film. This is deplorable. It's awful. And quite frankly, I don't think there'll be another film that will beat this film for worst film of the year. Then again, I said that last year with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Halloween Ends did it. But it's almost safe to say this is probably going to be the worst film of the year. 1 star. Don't waste your time with this film. Find some other film to watch. I hope you enjoyed episode 100 of the podcast. For more information on Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, and the Slasher app at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling. You can join the podcast's official Facebook group. Just type in Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling in the search engine. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast providers, along with youtube.com at FilmIKmedia and DarkDiscussions.com. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Have a good day. Support indie wrestling and support indie horror. This has been a Film Arcade Media production.